Hello everyone, Marina FC and this is Bluelions TV, and today I'm bringing you guys a video on Antonio Conte and the situation regarding his future. Now recently there have been a lot of conflicting reports in regards to what's happening with Conte and Chelsea. I already brought you guys another video, a news daily video, a few weeks back. It is reported that there are conflicts with Conte and Chelsea's board. Now before I get into the stories, I must give the brief history of what happened with Conte at Juventus. Now, of course, the reports of Conte having issues with Chelsea's board, it's not the first time Conte's been in a situation like that. It happened at Juventus, and basically it stemmed from the fact that it all came during the transfer window. Now, during that time, Vidal was very close to signing for Manchester United, and Pogba's future wasn't very secure. Cuadrado was a main transfer target for Antonio Conte, and that deal didn't come through because Juventus said they couldn't afford to pay for it. Now Conte was pretty frustrated, of course, being there for 3 seasons. He wants to progress in the Champions League, and he was thinking that the vision and the ambition by Juventus wasn't the same anymore. Maybe it was time for him to go, and that's how the conflict started during that moment in time. And then it led to a point where actually he left in May and then took the managerial role for Italy. At Chelsea, similar stories, similar issues, and I think with Conte, again, it comes down to transfer targets that he wants not necessarily coming. But at the same time at Juventus, when Conte did leave, Allegri came. They really only strengthened the team with Morata. And with that same team, they got to the Champions League final and really progressed and showed Europe how serious a side they were. Now, was Cuadrado really the main issue for Conte? End of the day, maybe it's some hindsight, but Cuadrado, has he really lived up to any world-class billing that he was being touted with back in the day? It seems pretty short term, and Conte has always had a bit of a criticism in the Italian press in terms of him being a bit too fiery. Now, we don't ever see this side of him in English football. We saw it recently in a press conference, but in Italy he was known for being very fiery and heated and very controversial in his press conferences. And I think with Conte, he is very headstrong, and in a way, when you're a successful manager and you have won things, it's in your nature to always know what you need, because you know what you're doing, because you've had a history of winning, and the club should show ambition and give you all the right materials that you need to succeed. And I feel with Conte necessarily, of course, some other targets he couldn't get. Again, Cuadrado was that main one. At Chelsea, I feel it is a bit of a disservice in terms of people thinking that he isn't necessarily getting the targets that he wants. End of the day, the likes of Nainggolan, he decided he didn't want to come because he'd rather stay at Roma. But who did we get instead? N'Golo Kante, and look how fantastic he's been for us. So there's certainly levels compared to Chelsea and Juventus. If Conte couldn't get his first choice target at Juventus, that was it. But at Chelsea, if Conte can't get his first choice target, then I'll go for plan B, and I think Kante is a fantastic plan B in my opinion. Other players as well, like Koulibaly. End of the day, you know, the club like Chelsea, as I explained before, Abramovich isn't pumping his own money in now. We're self-financing. The money we make through player transfers and commercial deals is what we use, because we're very serious about sticking with financial fair play. Now, of course, to spend 60 million on Koulibaly is an astronomical amount of money, and in a way I'm not too disappointed, because who did we bring in? David Luiz, and look at the season he had for us last year, the best defender in the Premier League for half the money. So it's working out in his favour. Of course, this transfer window, this is where the issues have stemmed from, because of course issues with him and the board, and by the board, as I said in the previous video, it is Marina Granovskaia, because she's given full responsibility and control of how much money the club spends. She's in control of the finances. She takes all responsibility. Abramovich has instilled that with her. Now, like I was saying, I understand the frustrations from Conte's part in terms of certain players you just need to spend the money on. But I feel certain players he was interested in didn't make sense from a business point of view from Chelsea, and a long-term point of view. Akandrava coming, Llorente, Barkley, Oxlade-Chamberlain for 40 million. In a way, we were kind of lucky that Oxlade-Chamberlain decided to sign for Liverpool instead. I mean, what would he add to this team? A 40 million outlay. That was Conte's preference. That was a Conte target. He really wanted to bring him in because of his versatility. But who cares about versatility if you're an average player? And end of the day, that's what Oxlade-Chamberlain is. And it feels that Conte basically doesn't like that. He feels that he's being demeaned. He wants to have full authority, and he feels that they're not doing enough to get in his main targets. Yeah, I know Alexandra was a target. Unfortunately, the club weren't able to get him in. If anything, I feel Granovskaia will have to take some responsibility because she let the negotiations delay for too long. She was taking too much time and she isn't as creative with her negotiations as she should be. For example, when Cuadrado went to Juventus, it was a 3-year loan deal. Now, can you imagine Chelsea doing anything like that at all? Probably not. And I feel that sometimes you need to think outside the box to get the targets you want. And for some of the targets that didn't come, your Alexandros, for example, she'll have to take responsibility for that. But at the same time, I've always felt personally the issue of the squad being too small isn't really a thing, in my opinion. But anyway, getting on to some of the reports surrounding Conte, as supported by Marca, they've actually said that Conte will be leaving at the end of the season and Abramovich is already looking for potential targets to take over. Duncan Castle, reporting for Arab News, stated that Conte is actually interested in a potential move to Paris Saint-Germain, and he feels personally that, you know what, he doesn't want to stay at the club anymore. The Metro reported earlier too that Conte has regrets of staying this season and should have left during the summer. And of course, there's a lot of conflicting reports, but at the end of the day, Conte hasn't signed an extension to his contract. He only agreed a term for more money. So that speaks the most truth compared to anything else out there. And of course, with some of these football rumours, there isn't smoke without fire. We might not have concrete evidence and proof of what's happening, but there's definitely things happening behind the scenes. And the nature of football is those things do get leaked out. We saw similar things with Jose Mourinho. Of course, the club supported him, denied everything until the inevitable happened, and we're starting to see similar patterns with what's happening now. And with us Chelsea fans, unfortunately, it's a cycle that we keep seeing repeated again and again, and it gets me thinking, why does it keep happening with Chelsea? And I have stated it before without going into super detail, but it comes down to the fact that the philosophies at the club are completely different. You've got Emanalo, who's the technical director. He's looking at player recruitment, scouting. He liaises with the scouts as well. Then you've got Marina, who's the voice of the directors. She's the one negotiating deals. She secures them, does the finances, sets out how much money is going to be spent in the window. And she actually has more power than that because she's actually the one who does the managerial transfer negotiations as well. For example, when we brought in Mourinho for his second spell, she was the one that did the negotiations. She started discussions with Mourinho a year before he left Real Madrid. She's the one that helped to sweeten him by getting him that Bugatti that a Roman paid for. She persuaded Roman to give Mourinho a second chance, and she's the one that got the deal brought in. And that's how she started to get a reputation, especially with her works with Vitesse Arnhem and how she set up that feeder club with them as well. And again, with Antonio Conte, she was the one that did negotiations to bring Conte in. He became manager, won us the league last season, so she has a lot more power at the club than people realise. It comes down to one thing, because there's no unified philosophy, these cycles will forever continue and continue. Now, you look at someone like Conte, if you keep bringing in managers purely focused on winning, but you don't care about how they win things, then it's natural that conflicts like this will happen in the future. Now, you know with Conte, you know his style of management, how he gets his teams winning. And again, the club's philosophy is that we want you to use some of the young guys as well. For example, in January, when Musunda and Aki came, Conte didn't want them. He wanted to bring in Llorente and Biabiani. And again, it's always going to be this thing with Conte where he wants things done his way, yet the board are trying to instill other things onto him. And because the club aren't going for managers that really suit the vision they want, because they only focus on what they've won throughout their career and their CV, this is always going to be the inevitable at Chelsea. For example, Emanalo was brought in during 2011 and he had a great vision for the club. He was the one that brought in and scouted Belgium in advance. The likes of Hazard came, De Bruyne, Lukaku, Courtois, the Musunda brothers, and he had a vision at the club because at that time the philosophy was want to play expansive football, a high pressing style and attractive football. And of course, the minute Di Matteo left, the whole thing changed on its head as normal. Mourinho came, has his own philosophies and style. And of course, again, we saw during the first half of that season, we were playing great, attractive football. After the Spurs loss, Mourinho retreated back to his normal habits and the team never got that spark back again. Similar things happened last season with Conte as well, because at the end of the day, if these managers come, they are willing to change a bit, but then because they're their own managers with their own philosophies and styles, naturally they're going to revert back to what they know. And because of this lack of philosophy, it actually makes it unfair to managers like Mourinho and Conte, because they never get fully supported in their vision, because the club have their own separate vision to what the manager has. And Conte has a previous history already of having conflicts with the board and not getting his way. So it's natural that this is going to happen. If you ask me, in my opinion, do I think Conte is going to be here for a third season? Personally, I don't think that's going to be the case. And I think whoever we bring in as a manager, we need to revert back and start from zero again, because unless we have a philosophy at Chelsea, it's going to be a continuous cycle of managers coming, not getting fully supported because the club have their own ideas. And then for us fans, it's going to damage us, because then we go through seasons of success and nothing. And there's no continuity, it's the same old thing. And why is a philosophy needed? Because again, we're signing players built for a specific system, then a new manager comes in with his own ideals, and naturally that's going to contradict the reason why the players are brought in the first place. So in this regards, I'm always going to feel sympathetic to any manager that comes, because unless the board have a unified philosophy, they work together, they decide what the future of the club's going to be like, they decide to go for long-term success over short-term success, it's going to become a continuous cycle for us fans, and it's not going to be fair on us. At the same time, do I think that Conte is without any criticism? Me personally, I don't think so. Now, a lot of his issues about the summer transfer window, I think he created them a lot by himself. For example, we've seen the likes of Chalobah get called up to the England squad, Ruben Loftus-Cheek and Tammy Abrahams. We're seeing Bertrand Traoré doing very well at Lyon so far. We had players in that squad from last season that, given more responsibility, could have stepped up and shown what they could do. But instead, we've got players at the club who aren't necessarily as good anymore, in my personal opinion. And our summer recruitment was kind of weird in a way, because for example, let's say with Bakayoko, we decided to sign this guy even though he had an injury issue and he was going to need a few months to really settle in and get accustomed to things. Why is he allowed to have that right to have a few months of gelling into the team, when Chalobah, with those same few months that Bakayoko's playing in, could have really benefited from it even more? It's been reported recently that Conte had a real go at the squad after that disappointing loss to Roma away, and he stated basically that, of course, any players who aren't showing any signs of improvement will be out the team. Now again, it's been a pattern for the past few weeks of seeing players perform poorly. Now what's taken them so long to really come to that realization that I need to start changing things and giving other squad players a chance to prove what they can do, especially if my first choice options aren't doing the job? What's the justification from Conte to not use Christensen, who's been the most accomplished defender so far this season, hasn't put a foot wrong and deserves more game time? Why is he reluctant to use him, especially when he has been the best and other defenders aren't performing as well and are making mistakes all the time? It goes on and it goes on. And another thing too, Conte's system, of course, with professional football, we have to understand, in this league especially, you do get found out tactically after a while. That's why in the history of football, you've never seen the same tactic used by a team forever. It usually lasts for 2 to 3 seasons, then it stops, because teams understand how to play against you. And unfortunately, teams have really found out how to play against us now, especially when they press us man to man, because we struggle to play out from the back. Now, what's Conte's reasonings for not trying to adapt things? Because how many times, how many mistakes do you have to see until you actually realise there's a problem with the system? I don't think that comes down to the board, especially when I don't think injury crisis has been too extreme as it's been put out to be. And I feel that at the end of the day, you're working with the squad, you're working with the players, you should be adapting things to help change and to help things flow. For example, when you're using a Fabregas, using him box to box. Now against Roma, he gave the ball away the most, but at the same time he won the ball the most out of any defender on the pitch. There's something wrong there. Surely that's Bakayoko's job, but even then, if you've got Fabregas running, it's no surprise that he's constantly losing the ball because he's tired. That's not his style. Some like Michy Batshuayi and even Morata now, they're starting to struggle a bit now, because with the pressure they're getting from defenders, especially when they're getting double marks a lot of times, they're finding it really hard to get into the game. Surely the tactics should be accommodated to help suit with things, to change things. I think that's where a lot of fans' frustrations are coming from, because the same things they're moaning about is what they've been seeing for the past few weeks and even since last season as well. And in football, if you don't seal up a crack, it eventually gets bigger and gets wider. Still, all of this comes to no avail, because the reality is Conte probably will leave But then what? We'll get another manager. The same thing will probably happen to them, because it's been a saga that's been happening for more than 13 years now, and it's not changing, it's not getting any better. Unless the figures at the top, the directors and the technical director, they either give responsibility to Emanalo to help with the footballing decisions, or they accept, you know what, we're going to have a plan, we're going to build for the future, long-term success. Because really, unless there's a plan at Chelsea, it's going to be the same cycle all the time. Anyway, you guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Just my thoughts and opinions on the Conte situation. I'll probably update this and do a future video as more information comes out. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I think it's a bit of an interesting discussion and topic, so I want to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comment section. Anyway, you guys, I'm EFC. This is Bluelions TV. Signing out.